Stop. No matter what you're doing right now, stop. What I'm about to say isn't for everyone listening. It's directed specifically at you. You've been carrying a doubt, a heavy feeling that something was taken from your path over the last 3 years, and no one around you has been able to explain why the stagnation happened. Deep down, you sense there was a concealment, an invisible movement that kept the doors shut even when you did everything expected of you. I came here to reveal exactly what happened. In the next few minutes, you're going to understand the reason behind that prolonged silence that marked the last 3 years of your life. We'll identify the root of the pattern that locked your progress, and before we finish, you'll receive confirmation of your calling, delayed, never cancelled. Stay focused, because what I'm about to deliver is the missing piece that will let you stop fighting against the wind and start walking with clarity. You've been living with an exhaustion that doesn't come from physical labor, but from the soul. It's that tiredness you feel upon waking, as if the night wasn't enough to restore your energy. You look at doors that, for other people, seem to open easily, but for you they remain sealed, almost as if there's an invisible lock on the mechanism of your destiny. You feel like years of your life have been simply stolen, time you can't get back, time you planted but were prevented from harvesting. That feeling that something was hidden from you isn't imagination. It's a spiritual perception of reality. Your intuition has been screaming that a frequency is operating against your prosperity, a stagnation that isn't the result of your lack of faith or effort. You tried everything. You changed strategies, changed the tone of your voice, changed how you relate to others, but the result stays the same. A weight that seems endless. This 3-year cycle isn't a punishment, it's a filtering process. Still, it's time to recognize that the exhaustion you're carrying is actually proof that you are trying to carry a weight that doesn't belong to you. If even one of these points just touched your heart, if you felt relief realizing you're not crazy for sensing something was wrong, pause for a moment and take a deep breath. Let that truth settle. By typing those 3 numbers, you're not just leaving a record. Attention! You need to prepare yourself now. I have prepared material for those who doubt their own calling from God and still do not have confirmation. Are you one of the chosen? We'll give you that clarity. These are the 7 signs of the language of the calling, marks of God in the story of every chosen one, so you can reread your story and recognize the purpose sealed over you before the foundation of the world. Stop calling coincidence what is actually a calling. Stop silencing the sacred restlessness. Stop postponing the answer you feel. Your window is closing, and a chosen one who does not recognize the calling does not walk in purpose. More than 10,000 people have already read the 7 signs and received the conviction they had been seeking for years. They were just like you. They felt something no one understood. They lived in silent doubt, and they discovered it was real, and it had a name. The offer is open only this month. Access the link in the pinned comment now, before doubt steals another year from your calling. You're sealing your acknowledgement that stagnation is not your destination. It's your yes to being released from that weight. Type 888, then come right back to me, because we need to go deeper into the mechanics of what was hidden. What happened in the last 3 years is that you were placed in an intensive training environment under a veil of invisibility. What was hidden from you wasn't just the opportunity, it was your true dimension. Often, what we call closed doors are actually protections against paths that weren't aligned with what you were designed to be. You operated for a long time under a programmed delay. It wasn't a mistake, it was a safeguard. The effort you wasted in false directions, in places that couldn't contain your essence, was the cost of a lesson you couldn't have learned any other way. You were kept in a holding corridor because if the door had opened sooner, you wouldn't have had the structure needed to sustain what was on the other side. Think of it like a garden that had to be pruned down to the root. You looked at the soil and saw only dry earth, not understanding that the invisible weeds were being removed by the very lack of water. Your 3-year desert served to purge from you the need for external validation, the fear of being who you truly are, and the dependence on human strategies that always failed. You were forced to look inward because outside, nothing was responding anymore. And it's in that stillness, in that place of apparent silence, that your calling began to be redrawn. What was hidden from you was your own authority, because those who know their authority no longer accept crumbs. You've been trained not to accept anything less than your original purpose, and now the structure you built in silence is what will sustain what comes next. It's no longer about human effort, it's about recognizing your identity. The delay wasn't a refusal, it was a silent preparation, so that when the moment came, you wouldn't just enter, you'd stay. You're being positioned for something that requires a much stronger foundation than the one you had 3 years ago. Understand that the pain of that time was the price of your foundation. No one builds an eternal building on the shifting ground of anxiety, and you needed that time to become unshakable. The mechanism of the delay you lived through wasn't a detour or a failure in your dedication. It's what I call a programmed delay. All this time, you kept knocking on doors that were actually locked by a protection you couldn't yet see. You spent vital energy trying to climb mountains that weren't part of your original topography, believing exhaustion was the same as productivity. The effort you put in was real, but the direction was drawn on maps that no longer served the territory you walk on today. You were trying to use tools from a cycle that had ended to build a castle in a time that hadn't yet arrived. That delay served to exhaust all your human attempts. You needed to reach absolute exhaustion where no cards were left in your hand, so you could finally surrender to what was planned for you from the start. The wasted effort was actually a filter. It removed from you the illusion that control is yours, and it's precisely the absence of that control that makes your new phase unshakable. Now imagine an ancient garden, a place you forgot belonged to you. For 3 years, you watched that garden wither under weeds that grew at a terrifying speed, suffocating the roots of what should have been blooming there. You tried to water, to prune, to fence it in, but nothing seemed to stop the advance of what shouldn't have been there. What you didn't know is that this disorderly growth was only a surface layer. Beneath those weeds, the soil was being prepared. The very stubbornness of the invasive plants forced the deep roots of your essence to go deeper, seeking a water source that didn't depend on the surface climate. You needed this time of apparent abandonment so that the pruning could happen naturally. What looked like suffocation was actually the removal of what didn't have the strength to stay. The weeds weren't a punishment. They were a sign that the soil was too rich to support only the basics. Now you understand that pruning isn't a process of destruction. It's a process of revelation. When the last weed is removed, what remains won't be an empty garden, but the original design of what was always yours. Let this acceptance anchor your transition. The act of typing those 3 words is your commitment that you will no longer fight against what was necessary for your expansion. Write it now, then come right back to me. As you recognize this pattern, you begin to see that the solution doesn't require a new strategy, but a return to the identity that was suppressed. For years, you carried fears that weren't yours. You inherited the caution of generations who lived in scarcity, the distrust of those taught to protect every crumb for fear of tomorrow. That inherited fear kept you operating on a survival frequency when you were already ready for the frequency of abundance. Dismantling that fear is your true liberation. You no longer need to protect yourself from a future that's already been guaranteed. The identity that was hidden from you, the one that knows it doesn't need permission to occupy its rightful place, is the only tool you need now. Everything that happened in the last 3 years was designed to strip away the layers of fear, doubt, and need for approval that were glued onto you since childhood. When those layers fall, your truth remains. And your truth isn't timid. Your truth doesn't ask permission. It simply occupies the space because it recognizes that space was always reserved for it. You are unlearning survival in order to learn how to reign over the purpose entrusted to you. The person you were before those years of silence no longer exists, and that's not a loss. It's the greatest achievement of your life. You are being returned to yourself, stripped of everything that was merely decorative, so that nothing hinders the manifestation of what is coming. The fear that paralyzed you was only the shadow of your own power, which you didn't yet have internal authorization to exercise. Now that authorization has been granted by the very process of maturation you went through. You are no longer the same, and your new form is the only one that can sustain what is being delivered at this moment. If something in this message confirmed what your spirit already knew, let your like be your wordless amen. Don't see it as a social media metric or a way to gain reach. Understand it as a spiritual agreement, a way of signaling that what was named here was named accurately. It's a gesture of recognition between the one delivering the message and the one receiving it. A silent pact that the truth has been heard and accepted. There's no need for explanations or forced public engagement. Just let your movement of approval function as a seal of truth over everything we've uncovered so far in our walk. There is someone in your life who needs to receive these exact words today. Think of that person who has been working much harder than everyone around them, yet still watches the doors stay closed, not understanding why so much effort hasn't led to harvest. Think of someone who has been holding a deep silence, a stillness that no one around them can explain, carrying a posture of waiting for a sign that never seems to come. That person's face just came to your mind. It wasn't an accident. That person isn't just tired, they're in a transition they can't yet name. Send this message to them now. Send it as an official delivery, a ministry of care, ensuring they know that their silence is not a sign of abandonment, but of preparation. You are the messenger they've been waiting for, even if they don't know how to ask. Don't do this as a wish or vain hope. Do it as a confirmation of identity, the agreement that was silently formed between the larger plan and your ability to listen throughout this conversation is a territory you will inhabit for the rest of this season of your life. Type slowly. Feel the weight of each letter, letting your fingers physically do what your spirit is already doing on an invisible level. You are marking your place. You are declaring your readiness. You are taking your position on the board of life, where nothing is left to chance anymore. You are committed. You are commissioned. You are sent. Your walk is no longer guided by trial and error, but by an authority that was restored in the secret place of your soul. Everything that was hidden during these 3 years of waiting now reveals itself as the foundation needed for what you are about to build. Don't look back to mourn the time or the opportunities that seemed lost, because what you lived through was the forge that removed the impurities from your vision. Now you see with clarity the path that was always before you, but the fog of fear wouldn't let you recognize. Your readiness is your greatest tool, and your willingness to accept the truth is the fuel that drives your next step. Stop, please. What you lived through in the last 3 years wasn't a detour or a failure in your dedication. It was a pruning. What you felt as an absolute block, that deafening silence where doors seemed locked from the inside, had a purpose that only now begins to be revealed. You've been carrying a weight that doesn't belong to you, a feeling that someone or something hid the keys to your own life. But pay close attention, because the fog is lifting. In the next few minutes, you will understand the anatomy of this delay. You will recognize the exact pattern that kept your energy stagnant while you struggled so intensely. And most importantly, I will reveal the key to your immediate restoration. This is not an invitation to fight harder. It's a call to align with what is already available to you. You've been feeling an exhaustion that sleep doesn't cure. It's as if time passed faster for everyone else, while you remained parked in a waiting room that seemed to have no exit. If you look back, you'll realize that many of the doors that slammed in your face were actually protecting you from paths that would have drained the little light left in your soul. This act is your first conscious affirmation that you accept the truth about this waiting period. Type 888, then come right back to me. The program delay you experienced wasn't punishment. It was protection against a premature harvest that would have destroyed the root you still needed to strengthen. During these 3 years, you were forced to loosen the ropes that tied you to others' expectations. You tried with all your strength to make things work in places where the soil was already exhausted. You poured vital energy into structures that weren't designed to support the weight of your true calling. What looked like failure was actually your liberation from mediocrity. Imagine a garden that for a long time was choked by invisible weeds. Those plants grew so quickly that they blocked the sun and stole nutrients from what should have been your true blossoming. The pruning was painful. The cut was deep. But without that emptying, you would never have had the space needed for the original seed, the one planted in your being before you even had consciousness, to finally find its way to the surface. You weren't being neglected, you were being guarded, while the environment around you was being cleaned. Let this recognition anchor your position. The act of declaring this makes your readiness for the new phase irreversible. Type, I am ready, then come back to me. Now understand what comes next. You don't need to build a new identity. You only need to let the dust of others' expectations fall away. What you inherited from past generations, that ancestral fear that success is dangerous or that happiness is a temporary privilege, is what kept your feet stuck for so long. That belief isn't yours. It's a program installed without your consent. By realizing this, the power of that fear disintegrates. You are not here to prove anything to anyone. You are here to be who you were designed to be. Every time you choose your truth over others' approval, you accelerate your realignment. Your like at this moment, silent and firm, functions as a wordless amen, a sacred agreement that what has been named here is your own reality. There is someone you know, someone who has been working in silence, someone carrying an exhaustion they can't explain even to those closest to them. That person, whose face just came to your mind, is living through the same days of waiting you lived through. Send this content to them, not as advice, but as a testimony. That's your way of ministering to someone who still can't see the way out. Not as a request, but as the definitive confirmation of your authority over your destiny. The transition you're experiencing now is the seal that separates your past from a new era of clarity and provision. Type slowly, feeling the weight and importance of each letter in your existence. You are, and the time of doubt is over. The rebuilding of your journey doesn't happen through great thunderclaps or spectacular events. It happens in the subtlety of a choice made in the morning silence, when you finally decide to stop asking permission to occupy the place that was always yours by right. During these last 3 years, you were kept in a waiting cycle, a waiting room that seemed to have no door out. But the truth is that the ceiling of that room was just a mental construct, glass reinforced by the belief that you weren't ready yet. The revelation that the priest brought to light isn't about what you did wrong, but about what was hidden from your perception so that you wouldn't access the power you carry at your core. When you understand that this delay wasn't a punishment but an incubation period, your anger turns into clarity. You realize that every door that didn't open was actually a protection against paths that would have tried to fragment your essence. What was hidden from you is the simplicity of your own authority. You were taught to search for keys in others' hands when your own being already held the secret to every passage. Observe how the pieces start to fit now. Conversations that once drained your energy now lose their power, and the need to explain your decisions simply disappears. You stop trying to convince the world and began listening to the voice that dwells in your own calm. This transition is proof that the cycle is over. There's no more need to carry the weight of what has already been overcome. What was hidden was your ability to create from nothing, to transform scarcity into abundance simply by shifting your perspective. The structure of your destiny isn't something to be conquered with strenuous effort, but something to be recognized by your spirit. You were operating under a fog that prevented clear visualization of your next steps. But that fog dissipates the moment you accept your position as someone who no longer needs validation. The story of the 3 years of silence isn't a mark of failure. It's the mark of the time needed for your internal structure to become capable of sustaining what you are about to manifest. No one told you this, because many around you are still trapped in the same illusion that life is a competition for limited resources. You, however, have awakened to the law of provision, where what is yours finds its way to you without tricks. The scenery in front of you is changing, not because external circumstances moved, but because you stopped bowing before them. The strength you feel pulsing now isn't new. It's your ancestral memory being activated. What was once mystery becomes instruction. What was an obstacle reveals itself as a springboard. You are being called to a level of consciousness where doubt has no room to survive, and every move you make is guided by an intuition that never fails. This is your harvest, the moment when the seed planted in the dark of that 3-year period finally breaks through the soil and turns toward the light, growing with the strength of one who knows their purpose. Your life is no longer a reflection of the expectations placed on you, but the pure manifestation of what you decided to be when no one was watching. The time for excuses is behind you, and the era of your execution has begun. You realize that by letting go of control, you gain mastery. By accepting your place, you occupy your authority. The path is now straight, without distractions, focused on the truth you carry, and that now begins to overflow into every field of your existence. Do you feel that relief now? It's as if a gear that had been stuck for 1,000 days finally turns without resistance. Know that this feeling isn't accidental. It's confirmation that the testing period is over. For a long time, you believed the silence from above was forgetfulness, but today you understand it was protection. For 3 years you were kept in an invisible training field, where your patience was forged and your faith purified from all surface-level expectations. If you look back and recognize that despite the pain and the feeling of stagnation, you never gave up, then you understand exactly what I'm saying. Do you feel that something deep was touched in you during these minutes? Typing those digits is the seal of your acceptance of your new phase. It's your signature on the contract of one who no longer bows to the time of men, but walks in the time of providence. Type 888, then come back here so we can seal the next step of our conversation. Take a deep breath. Feel how the air fills not only your lungs, but also that emptiness you carried for so long. The mechanics of this programmed delay I mentioned are simple. You couldn't receive what was destined for you, while your internal structure still sought external validation. You had to be pruned, like a tree whose side branches were cut so the main trunk could grow strong enough to support the fruit to come. Your life was a garden that seemed to have stopped blooming, but what was actually happening was underground growth, an expansion of your roots that no one saw, but that from today onward will provide the support for the most abundant harvest you've ever lived. Let these words anchor your commitment to the transformation that has already begun to operate in you, right now, with the conviction of one who no longer waits for the future, but already inhabits the reality of your victory. When you finish, come back here so we can continue. Remember, what was hidden from you all this time wasn't your ability, but your own nature. You were taught to think you needed permission to occupy your place, when in truth you were always the owner of the house. The like you leave at this moment is not for metrics, not for the world to see. It's your wordless amen. It's the silent agreement between what was revealed here and what you feel inside. It's the acceptance that the game has changed, And you are no longer the spectator of your own story, but the protagonist who sets the tone for the coming chapters. There is someone nearby, someone you know, whose face just came to your thoughts. Maybe it's someone who, like you, works in silence. Someone who has been carrying invisible burdens and seems to have closed themselves off from the world out of pure exhaustion. That person carries a light that is being suffocated by the fear of not being enough. Send this message to them now, not as advice, but as a delivery. Maybe they just need to hear from someone they trust that the time of silence is over and their calling is alive. Be the messenger who brings the confirmation they've been asking for in secret. Right now, all across the world, others are receiving this same recognition tonight. You are part of something that does not announce itself, and that is exactly why it is real. Attention! You need to prepare yourself now. I have prepared material for those who doubt their own calling from God and still do not have confirmation. Are you one of the chosen? We'll give you that clarity. These are the 7 signs of the language of the calling, marks of God in the story of every chosen one, so you can reread your story and recognize the purpose sealed over you before the foundation of the world. Stop calling coincidence what is actually a calling. Stop silencing the sacred restlessness. Stop postponing the answer you feel. Your window is closing, and a chosen one who does not recognize the calling does not walk in purpose. More than 10,000 people have already read the 7 signs and received the conviction they had been seeking for years. They were just like you. They felt something no one understood. They lived in silent doubt, and they discovered it was real. And it had a name. The offer is open only this month. Access the link in the pinned comment now before doubt steals another year from your calling.